The flower of democracy. Understanding the values of equality and human dignity. Dedication. To our children, our grandchildren, and all future generations, may they never bow to injustice, nor yield to oppression. Introduction. Democracy is not something to be taken for granted. It is neither an immutable force of nature nor an inevitable state of human affairs. It is a system built on principles that demand constant commitment, protection, and renewal. History has shown that even the strongest democracies can deteriorate if their foundations are neglected, their values taken for granted, or if those entrusted with defending them become indifferent. Today, we are witnessing a global trend that challenges fundamental rights and fuels the spread of misinformation and disinformation, both of which pose serious threats to the very core of democratic societies. After World War II, Europe recognized the mistakes of its past. It emerged as a stronghold of Western democracies, embracing freedom, equality, solidarity, and respect for human dignity. However, these principles are now being tested both within and beyond its borders. We must, therefore, ask ourselves, how can we safeguard democracy in the face of these challenges? This book serves as a practical guide for citizens who believe in democracy and wish to contribute to its protection. It is not merely a theoretical discussion but a clear and insightful analysis of the essential elements that uphold democratic systems. It explores the key factors necessary to strengthen democratic institutions and values, examining areas such as civic education, the rule of law, the fight against misinformation, and the promotion of social and economic inclusion. Preserving free societies is not solely the responsibility of governments. It requires collective commitment and the participation of all sectors of society. Whether you are a student, a teacher, a journalist, an entrepreneur, or simply an engaged citizen, your awareness and understanding of these principles are crucial. Every informed decision, every effort to uphold justice, and every stand taken in defense of fundamental rights contributes to the stability of an open and inclusive society. We stand at a decisive crossroads. One path leads to growing division, social inequality, and the erosion of democratic norms. The other fosters vigilance, cooperation, and a commitment to the principles that have shaped free societies. This book provides knowledge and insights into the importance of democracy and its ongoing development. The preservation of fundamental values depends on the awareness and collective dedication of those who choose to defend them. Chapter 1. The Birth of Democratic Ideals. The concept of democracy, understood as a system in which the people have a voice in governance, has deep historical roots. While modern democratic structures result from centuries of evolution, their earliest manifestations can be traced back to ancient civilizations that experimented with collective decision-making and political participation. Understanding the origins of democracy provides insight into the struggles and innovations that have shaped the way societies govern themselves today. The earliest forms of political participation. The first known example of a structured democratic system emerged in ancient Greece, particularly in Athens, during the 5th century BCE. The Athenian model was a direct democracy, where citizens participated in political decision-making without needing elected representatives. At the heart of this system was the ecclesia, an assembly where eligible citizens debated and voted on laws, military campaigns, and foreign policies. This level of public involvement was unprecedented and marked a significant departure from autocratic rule, introducing a form of collective governance. However, Athenian democracy was far from inclusive. Citizenship was granted exclusively to free Athenian men, excluding women, enslaved people, and foreigners from political participation. This exclusivity highlights the contradictions within early democratic systems, where the ideals of political equality coexisted with rigid social hierarchies. Despite these limitations, Athens laid the foundation for participatory governance, emphasizing public debate and civic duty. In contrast, the Roman Republic from 509 to 027 BCE developed a representative system that differed from the direct democracy of Athens. The Roman model was based on a complex structure of elected officials, including consuls, senators, and tribunes, each with distinct responsibilities. The senatus played a central role in policymaking. The comitia centuriata and comitia tributa allowed citizens to participate in legislative decisions and the selection of magistrates. This system introduced the principle of oversight and accountability, ensuring that power was not excessively concentrated in a single authority. One of the most significant contributions of the Roman Republic to later democratic thought was the concept of representation. Unlike Athens, where citizens participated directly in governance, the Roman model demonstrated the effectiveness of elected officials acting on behalf of the people. While the system remained dominated by the aristocracy, it introduced the idea that government could be managed through representatives rather than through direct participation by all citizens. The Middle Ages and the first limitations on power. With the fall of the Roman Republic and the subsequent rise of empires, the democratic principles of ancient civilizations were largely overshadowed by monarchies and the feudal system. During the Middle Ages, power was concentrated in the hands of kings and feudal lords, who ruled with little or no consultation of the populace. However, certain historical events marked the beginning of significant limitations on absolute power, paving the way for greater political representation. An essential step in curbing monarchical power took place in 1215 when King John of England accepted the Magna Carta. Under pressure from rebellious barons, the king agreed to a charter that established the principle that no ruler was above the law. While the Magna Carta did not create democracy in the modern sense, it introduced the idea that royal authority could be limited and certain rights should be protected. This document later influenced the development of constitutional governments, including the English Bill of Rights and the US Constitution. The emergence of early parliamentary structures in Europe marked another step toward broader political representation. In England, the development of Parliament between the 13th and 14th centuries signaled a transition from absolute monarchy to a system in which representatives of the nobility, clergy, and later the common people participated in governance. Similar structures emerged in other European nations, laying the groundwork for future legislative institutions that would become essential to modern political systems. Although these early attempts at representative institutions were often limited in scope, primarily serving the interests of the aristocracy rather than the general population, they introduced principles that would shape later democratic frameworks. Concepts such as rulers being accountable to a representative body, taxation requiring consultation, and laws being subject to public scrutiny became central to the evolution of democratic governance. The legacy of early democratic experiments. The democratic systems of ancient Greece and Rome, along with the legal and institutional developments of the Middle Ages, left a lasting legacy. They provided a model for political representation, citizen participation, and administrative transparency. While these early forms of democracy were imperfect, they demonstrated that governance could be based on shared power rather than absolute rule. Understanding the birth of democracy highlights the long and often challenging path toward broader political participation. Despite their significant limitations, ancient and medieval political systems introduced the very ideals that continue to shape modern democratic societies. Over time, democracy would evolve further, expanding participation, overcoming barriers imposed by elites, and moving closer to a system that seeks to represent all members of society. Chapter 2: From Monarchies to Popular Representation. The transformation from absolute rule to a democratic system was neither immediate nor inevitable. It emerged through centuries of political upheaval, social movements, and intellectual debates. The evolution of democracy in the modern era is evident through major revolutions, legal advancements, and continuous efforts to expand political participation and ensure fair representation. Revolutions and radical changes. The rise of modern democracy was strongly influenced by three major revolutions: the English Revolution from 1642 to 1651, the American Revolution from 1775 to 1783, and the French Revolution from 1789 to 1799. Each of these transformations marked the decline of absolute monarchy and the establishment of constitutional frameworks, redefining political structures and the relationship between rulers and the governed. The English Revolution set an important precedent by challenging the divine right of kings and affirming the authority of Parliament. The execution of Charles I and the subsequent establishment of the Commonwealth under Oliver Cromwell demonstrated that sovereign power could be questioned. Although England later restored the monarchy, the Glorious Revolution of 1688 consolidated parliamentary supremacy, laying the foundations for constitutional monarchy. The American Revolution reinforced democratic ideals by opposing colonial rule and asserting that government authority derives from the consent of the people. The U.S. Constitution, finalized in 1787, introduced mechanisms to balance power and prevent any single entity from gaining excessive control. This model influenced democratic governance worldwide. Significant historical texts, including the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, played a vital role in safeguarding fundamental freedoms through legal protections. The French Revolution took the democratic experiment to a radical level, directly challenging the privileges of the monarchy and the aristocracy. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, adopted in 1789, proclaimed equality before the law and the power of the people. However, the revolution also exposed the fragility of democracy, as political instability, internal struggles, and external pressures led to periods of authoritarian rule. Despite these challenges, the principles it introduced became fundamental to democratic movements across Europe. The 20th century and the expansion of democracy. While democratic ideals gained traction between the 18th and 19th centuries, it was in the 20th century that democracy emerged as the dominant form of government in much of the world. One of the most pivotal advancements was the broadening of universal suffrage, ensuring that all adult citizens, irrespective of gender, race, or socio-economic background, had the right to vote. In particular, the recognition of women's suffrage in various countries, beginning with New Zealand in 1893, marked a turning point for democratic inclusivity. After World War I, several new democratic states emerged, especially in Europe, as the collapse of empires made way for republican governments. However, the 1930s saw the rise of oppressive regimes, including Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia, demonstrating that democracy was not an irreversible progress. The devastation of World War II underscored the need for representative governments, leading to the creation of international institutions such as the United Nations, which promoted self-determination and human rights. The post-war period saw a significant wave of decolonization, with many nations in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean gaining independence and establishing democratic structures. While these newly formed democracies faced numerous challenges, the concept of shared political responsibility spread globally. The downfall of authoritarian governments in Latin America, together with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, contributed to the wider reach of the democratic system. In the second half of the 20th century, civil rights movements gained momentum, opposing systemic inequalities and fighting for the full political participation of marginalized communities. In the United States, key legislative actions, such as the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, played a crucial role in advancing equal rights and dismantling barriers to voter participation. These reforms contributed to a more inclusive democratic process and set a critical precedent for the global expansion of democratic governance. Similar movements in South Africa, Eastern Europe, and Latin America highlighted the ongoing struggle for fair representation and political equality. The 21st century and contemporary challenges. Although democracy has become the predominant model of government, the 21st century presents new and complex challenges. One of the most pressing concerns is the impact of globalization on democratic institutions. With an increasingly interconnected economy, decisions made by multinational corporations and supranational organizations often bypass traditional democratic mechanisms, raising debates about the need to regulate their influence. Another growing issue is the spread of disinformation, amplified by digital platforms and social media. Fake news, propaganda, and manipulated content can shape public opinion, making it more difficult for citizens to make informed electoral decisions. Technology has transformed political discourse, creating both new opportunities and risks for democratic stability. Political participation is also undergoing changes. Declining voter turnout in many democracies reflects a growing disillusionment with traditional political parties and institutions. Many citizens feel disconnected from politics, leading to increased polarization and the rise of alternative political movements. Addressing these challenges requires a renewed effort to strengthen civic engagement, rebuild trust in democratic systems, and ensure institutions remain responsive to public needs. Despite these challenges, democracy remains dynamic, continuously adjusting to social and technological transformations. Although the path toward an inclusive and effective government is still ongoing, the principles established over centuries, representation, responsibility, and the protection of individual rights, remain the foundation of democratic societies. Their survival and success depend on the commitment of citizens to preserving these values and actively participating in ensuring long-term stability. Chapter 3: Education and Civic Awareness. After the Second World War, Europe was forced to acknowledge how vulnerable democracies could be if left unguarded. Past mistakes demonstrated how fragile freedom was and how the future required investment in education and culture. Schools became more than mere places of learning. They transformed into institutions where young minds could be educated in the values of justice, equality, and participation. Having democratic institutions was not enough. People needed to be able to uphold them. Imagine a society where individuals understand the value of their rights, engage in reasoned discussions, and make informed decisions. This is the promise of education, not merely a means of acquiring knowledge but the very foundation of democracy. An informed citizenry is not easily deceived, does not succumb to fear, and can hold its leaders accountable for their actions. But how can we ensure people develop the critical skills necessary to safeguard democracy? The answer lies in civic education, the key to unlocking human potential and a continuous process that empowers individuals, broadens perspectives, and fosters innovation. Education nurtures curiosity and the ability to question, laying the groundwork for critical thinking. It helps people navigate a complex world, equipping them with the tools to distinguish between truth and manipulation. An educated society values progress over stagnation, cooperation over division, and understanding over ignorance. At its core, education is not just a personal asset but a collective responsibility shaping communities and nations' future. Education as a means of integration. In recent decades, Europe has faced increasing waves of migration, with people fleeing poverty, persecution, and war. Recognizing both the challenges and opportunities this presents, European nations have worked to integrate newcomers by ensuring access to education and opportunities for civic participation. Through structured programs and inclusive policies, new arrivals are introduced to the fundamental principles of European civilization, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. By fostering mutual understanding and respect, education serves as a link between diverse cultures, allowing individuals to engage actively in their new communities and strengthen the common values that sustain European society. The urgency of civic education today. Today, the need for civic education is more urgent than ever. With disinformation spreading faster than truth and apathy threatening democratic engagement, it is essential to ensure that young people are prepared to play an active role in society. Across Europe, initiatives have been introduced to strengthen civic awareness. Various educational programs teach students the importance of voting, fact-checking, recognizing bias, and engaging in constructive debate. It is crucial for students to understand that democracy is not limited to voting but also involves an awareness of how politics affects everyday life. They must recognize that their voice matters not only during elections but also within their communities, workplaces, and daily interactions. Civic education encourages individuals to move beyond passivity and actively contribute to improving society. To support this learning process, resources such as the Civic Education Package and Citizenship Education in Europe provide guidelines on how to effectively teach democratic engagement. Beyond the classroom, a shared commitment. However, education is not confined to the classroom. Families, the media, and local communities all have a subsidiary role in creating an environment where democratic values can thrive. Although Europe has made significant progress, now is not the time for complacency. Instead, even greater energy and resources must be invested in this effort towards social growth and ethical improvement. Civic awareness is a living and dynamic force that sustains free societies. Its vitality depends on a collective commitment to passing on democratic values to future generations. Every citizen must play an active role in building a just society, one that embraces all its members in their diversity. Chapter 4: Defending the Rule of Law. Justice, fairness, and responsibility are the pillars of a well-functioning society. They ensure that power is kept in check, public administration remains transparent, and individual freedoms are protected. Without clear legal structures to guide decision-making, societies risk slipping into instability, where authority is determined by force rather than by principles of fairness and integrity. The legal framework that upholds these values is essential for democracy to remain strong. European history provides numerous examples of what happens when justice is disregarded. There have been times when laws were used as instruments of oppression rather than as safeguards of freedom. However, by learning from past mistakes, European nations have strengthened their legal institutions, ensuring that laws serve the people rather than the interests of a privileged few. This commitment is not merely theoretical but is reflected in constant efforts to protect democratic systems from abuse and corruption. The role of justice in everyday life. The principles of justice influence daily life in ways that often go unnoticed. They determine whether individuals receive a fair trial, whether the press is free to inform the public, and whether those in power are genuinely accountable for their actions. When legal structures function correctly, they generate trust in institutions and stabilize society. Maintaining the integrity of the legal system demands ongoing and concrete dedication. The assumption that fairness is always guaranteed can create an illusion of security, leaving room for corruption and political interference. These threats rarely emerge suddenly. Instead, they infiltrate gradually. A leader evades scrutiny, a journalist is pressured into silence. Laws are subtly altered to favor those in power. Over time, these small transgressions accumulate, eroding the foundations of justice and democracy. The responsibility of every citizen. Ensuring that legal principles remain intact is not solely the duty of governments and courts. Every individual has a role to play in their defense. When people understand their rights, they are more likely to challenge authority, demand fairness, and resist unjust decisions. Education is fundamental in cultivating this awareness. A society that promotes civic understanding shapes citizens who can actively contribute to a just system. Schools, universities, and public discourse must encourage this mindset, equipping people with the knowledge and confidence needed to defend their rights. A functioning legal system is not defined merely by the existence of laws, but by how they are applied. A country may have an extensive legal code, but if those in power manipulate it for their own advantage, justice remains an illusion. Actual impartiality exists when rules apply equally to all, power is constrained by clear limitations, and institutions are accountable to the people they serve. Threats to justice. In recent years, concerns have grown over attempts to weaken judicial independence, restrict press freedom, and limit public participation in governance. These threats do not arise in isolation, but are often part of interconnected strategies to consolidate power and reduce democratic oversight. When safeguards against abuses begin to falter, the consequences can be profound. By the time people recognize the full extent of the damage, it is often too late to reverse course. A system that guarantees justice is like the internal structure that holds a building upright. As long as it remains solid, everything functions as expected. But when cracks emerge, and integrity is compromised, the entire structure risks collapse. For this reason, legal protections must be constantly defended and reinforced. The strength of a democracy is reflected in the shared dedication to ensuring justice, responsibility, and respect for its fundamental principles. The real danger to democratic values lies not solely in those who seek to undermine them, but also in the complacency of those who assume they are unshakable. Fairness protection depends on people's willingness to remain vigilant and defend the systems that preserve their rights. A society that values transparency remains steadfast despite adversity, ensuring fair and impartial treatment for all. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. The full version of the text is available on Amazon.